Hello there, this is Sam McKewon along with Henry Cordes for the Omaha.com podcast. This is a special edition of the Omaha.com podcast. We're talking about the renovation of Memorial Stadium. And we're recording this as the University of Nebraska releases its initial renderings and broad philosophy and plan for a $450 million renovation of Memorial Stadium. Nebraska Athletic Director Trev Alberts has been touting this for a while. He talked about it very openly when he came to the university in 2021. And now the next step in the vision is here. Trev Alberts and other folks talked to Henry, who's had a long relationship with Trev, back to his days at UNO Athletics, about the renovation, some of the things that are going to be difficult about it, including displacement of some fans, and how the funding will work. Henry, how are you?
I'm really good. Really good. Thanks, Sam.
Well, I really like your story. It's very in-depth. There's a lot to cover, so we're gonna start with this. You attended Nebraska's 28-14 win over Louisiana Tech. You sat in the stadium. The reasons that Nebraska is changing its stadium isn't necessarily because it's going to crumble or fall apart, but they want to modernize it because I think there's a sense that they're not necessarily meeting the current fan appreciation or demand for more amenities. So here's a good way to start this. You had an experience in Memorial Stadium on Saturday. What was that like, and how would that change with the new renovation? And we'll get over the details of the renovation in a second.
Well, we know the game day experience in Lincoln in many ways is very special. It's the sea of red. It's the Hail Varsity and the band out on the field, and that is definitely part of the game day experience that we have grown used to in Nebraska. But also part of the game day experience is what I experienced in East Stadium, which was sitting shoulder to shoulder, with some guy that I didn't even know, and kicking over my Pepsi because there was no cup holder, and getting one of those stadium seats just to kind of reserve a little space on that bench, that has these, very, very narrow seating. I mean, it's the stadium is very outdated, and it was built at a time when they were trying to cram as many people into Memorial Stadium as possible. That was the one and only goal back then, and now things have changed. There's big screen TV. It's very easy to sit at home and watch a game, and people expect a lot more than just a little 12 inches on a bench. And this is all about bringing Memorial Stadium into the 21st century and really the modern age of what fan expectations are, when they plunk down a lot of money to attend a football game.
So we'll start with the changes that are planned for East and West Stadium. You were in East Stadium over the weekend. These changes are relatively, understandable. They're going to put seat backs in every seat, presumably every seat in East and West Stadium. Many of these seats already have that because of suites and things like that. But there are areas such as the 600 level, such as many of the best seats in the house that aren't in that sort of mid-level that'll have seat backs. And then that'll also be true of West Stadium seats. For people who go to Memorial Stadium with any regularity, like myself, there are metal benches on the two sides, and the seats are about 12 inches wide. They've widened a few to 14, Trev talked about that over the summer, but it is a relatively tight fit, and you are not a big guy. Like, you're not. Like, I am, and forget it in terms of I sit in the press box in a very nice seat, but you're not what I would describe as like the 2023 size of certain fans, and so certainly there are fans that just really struggle to fit into that space. So putting seat backs will give them about 18 to 20 inches maybe, and of course that's going to reduce the capacity on both the east and the west side. But the big change is going to be in South Stadium. Probably the largest chunk of the stadium. It has for a long time been where visiting fans go, where much of the student section, maybe 60% of the student section is. And the fans that want to pay $12 to go all the way to the top of South Stadium, that's kind of where they sit. What's going to happen with South Stadium after the 2024 season?
Yeah, let's go back a little bit on East and West Stadium. The hope and plan is that there will be chair backs throughout East and West Stadium. It's not completely clear that there's room and that every row is wide enough for that, but that is the hope, that there will be chair backs throughout East and West Stadium. Now, in North Stadium, that can't happen because the rows are too narrow. I mean, North Stadium was built, at first they did East and West back in, of course, 1923 when they built the thing. I don't know when North Stadium was built, but it was actually built with narrower rows than East and West were. And when they did the renovation of North Stadium back in the early aughts, they just they kind of built onto the back of it, but they didn't change the basic rows. And so those rows are just too narrow for chairbacks. So there will not be chairbacks. There will continue to be benches in North. But yes, the huge changes in South Stadium, which is it's ironic. It's kind of the newest. It was the last part of the stadium built, but it's now become the most outdated of all the sections. Built in 1972 was the last one that kind of enclosed the section, but it was built in a single section. They could have done 2 levels, but it was just, I guess they did it on the cheap. It was all just one single section, and you can go back to row 90, whatever, 97, 98. It goes way back there. And if you're sitting in that last row, which I have before, you are out there, and there's
the seats cant backwards. They don't. It's not an uphill.
No, it's not tiered at all. It's not. It's in a more modern stadium, they're going to tier it, and it's going to have a really sharp rise, and you're going to be right on top of the action. That is not what you have in South Stadium now. It is very spread out from the action, and they're just going to demolish it. I mean, there's going to be no effort to save that section at all. And what they're going to put in its place is a multi-level, definitely steeper tiered stadium that will give people close to the action. That's going to become the new home for the students. They're going to put all the students there. They're going to put the band there. They're going to be on field level. And the other thing that Trev said, that by doing this kind of steeper tiered section, it opens up a lot of space behind that can become. They plan to put a lounge area for the students to gather and mingle back behind their seating area, and they're going to put club seats on one level, and there'll be a back club back there, and it creates those opportunities. They're doing something that they have never done in Memorial Stadium called loge seats, and they're kind of like mini suites is what they are. They're like 4 to 8 seat little sections of seats that are kind of their own little section.
And where will those be?
It's almost like having your own little living room right inside Memorial Stadium.
And where will those be?
It's unclear. It's just a concept drawing at this time, but it will likely be multiple levels. And when you talk concepts, if you want to get an idea of what this is going to look like, the best thing I found is that they're modeling this off of what was done in Wisconsin. Wisconsin redid their South Stadium. I think it opened just in the last year or two, and there's a good fly-through video of that gives you an idea of what that looks like, and it has these loge seats that you can see, and in their case, their loges sit underneath one of the overhangs, so there's seats over it, and then these loges are they're in open air. They're not like an enclosed box. They're open air. But it's your own little section, and in that case, it was underneath the overhang, so it was in open air, but it was also covered because it was beneath the section of the stadium above it. And I imagine that we're going to see at least 2 and maybe 3 or 4 level seating in South Stadium that will have the students on the bottom, another club level, and then another loge level, and then who knows, maybe some general seating on top. But they are actually not at that point yet. This is all just kind of concepts at this point, and they don't have those specifics worked out yet. The next set of drawings is, in fact, what they're going to ask the Regents to do on next Thursday is to approve the ability to go out and seek those actual detailed drawings of exactly what everything would look like.
Wisconsin end zone project, which we will see again this year. They had not done it in 2021 when we were last up there. Is 3 tiers. It's got standing seats kind of on the first level, kind of bar seating, and sort of like a rail where you can have a beer. And then they've got the tiers after that. There's 2 tiers, and then the loges are in between the second and third tier.
Right, and I think Wisconsin was limited because it backs right up to their field house, and they
so their student section is not there,
and their student section is not there, and they didn't want to cover up that W, that's kind of very it's a real distinctive feature of their old stadium, and so they were limited in how high they could go. And I'm sure Nebraska will go higher. In fact, that Wisconsin section, as I understand it, it only seats maybe like 5,000, maybe 3,000 to 5,000 people.
It's similar size to Utah and a few other places.
The South Stadium is going to probably seat 18 to 20, at least 18,000. It'll seat many more people than what they did there.
What does it seat now? 23.
23.
So it'll be an intimidating aspect to the stadium. If you raise the angle on that thing and you kind of steepen it up, then that becomes essentially a closed end, and you're trapping the noise.
Absolutely, it almost becomes a horseshoe in that way, and the renderings make South Stadium appear it's going to be almost as tall as East and West stadiums, at least in the rendering. So yeah, absolutely, it'll really enclose things in a lot.
And that creates sort of a 270-degree effect from east all the way around a goal line of west. And there's also going to be a concourse that travels behind the east, south, and west. Is that right?
Mobility is also a big goal of this, in addition to giving fans more elbow room. On field level, you will have 360 mobility all around the stadium, including into North Stadium. But then on the next level up, yes, and I don't know what you would call that level, a concourse level or something, that'll be 270-degree access from east to south to west. It will not connect into North Stadium, but yeah, there'll be a lot more circular action. Just because of the way that Memorial Stadium was built in these segments. I mean, they're not interconnected, as anybody knows, and if you have to go from one section to another, it can be quite a maze. To try to navigate that sometimes.
For sure. Another stadium that people could look at that has, in terms of the size of the end zone, would be Texas A&M. They completed their other end zone project in like 2012. Now Texas A&M seats about 110,000. I'm sorry, 103. But similar in terms of size. Iowa also has an end zone project that's relatively 18,000 seats. The difference between some of these is that, again, Nebraska intends to put its students in that section. That makes it similar to Minnesota. Minnesota has its students from the bottom all the way to the top in one end. And for Husker football fans who were at Minnesota or listen to players talk about it, that was a tough end for Nebraska to go into. That's where Jeff Sims threw the interception.
Okay.
There were some other things going on. And so I do think that one thing that has been lost, and it's, not lost, it's never really been true, is the Nebraska student section's always been kind of an odd duck. Like, it's the left side of South Stadium, and then there's a little strip in east, and this would appear to put just about everybody in that wedge. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the plan. That Trev said he really wants this to be student-centric. He seems to be very committed to giving the students a great space, not only to watch the game, but to become part of the game and to really have a great game day experience.
That's really notable. At Ohio State, as people who've been there, the students are in the end zone, and it is really tough. They're in the horseshoe end, and the horseshoe end is about as tall as North Stadium, and they're all there. And it's tough. It's a tough place. I'm not necessarily against end zone seating, but it needs to be very exclusive for students. So it sounds like they're going to have their own entrance. That 270-degree concourse is going to be really good. They need that. Maybe they'll be able to put some food options outside there as opposed to digging into the bowels of the stadium. We'll see. Inevitably, when you demolish something and you're rebuilding it, that's 23,000 people or 20,000, whatever, are going to be displaced. What are they going to do?
Well, it's a problem, and which they obviously recognize. Yes, We should put a timeline on this. There is some work on like infrastructure that will begin, almost as soon as this season is end, or certainly by the spring.
Okay.
They'll be doing that work. But the real work will not start until at the end of the 2024 season. So after next season,
Okay.
then they're going to implode South Stadium at that point. And South Stadium will not be available during 2025. That is a given. The people who sit there will not have certainly those seats again. And the current timeline calls for the stadium to be completed by 2026, but it's supposed to be done by August of 2026. That gives them less than 2 years to do that.
18 months.
And they're, even though that's the planned completion date, Trev says, I think we have to plan for the possibility that we won't have access to South Stadium in 2026 either. So for sure, no South Stadium in 2026 or 2025, perhaps 2026. And so, yes, they recognize they have to do something for those fans. There's a lot of longtime season ticket holders whose seats will be gone for that time. And they don't really know what they're going to do. They're kind of throwing around ideas. They've already been talking to some of the fans, and they're hopeful that they will get some grace. They're looking into the possibility of putting in some temporary seating in places, but that's kind of dicey. You could block sight lines for fans that are already there.
Yeah.
I just don't think that that's a really very realistic option. You always have some slight churn in season ticket holders elsewhere. So certainly some of those people might be able to get tickets in other parts of the stadium where they open up. Obviously, the students are a big part of this, and because they are a big part of South Stadium, and Trev says students will definitely be affected by this as well. He doesn't really have many answers at this point about how they're going to do. Will they have students only go to half the home games and split it between,
They do that at Duke basketball.
And that's certainly a concept. It's not one we discussed, but it's certainly that would be something to do. Maybe they could do the same thing for some of the fans, give them partial season tickets so that they, those that they can accommodate, that they can double the number that they can accommodate that way. He talked about opening up Pinnacle Bank Arena and the big screens there, and
could do that now.
Offering free food and to those fans, just as a way to kind of ease this. Or he said, maybe it's just recognizing their sacrifice afterwards, and I don't know how you do that. You make sure they get good seats in the new stadium.
Sure.
You give them a discount there are things that they can do to try to compensate those people. But the reality is they ain't going to be in the stadium for at least 1 or 2 years.
Percentage of the 23,000 are season tickets that are purchased by people to maintain the solid streak. I don't know what percentage that is, but that includes South Stadium seat. It also includes North Stadium seats. There's some North Stadium seats that are given back by opponents that are far up in North Stadium that boosters basically buy to maintain the solid streak. That solid streak's never probably going to go away because there's just people who will buy it up. But my point is there's going to be fewer tickets to have to buy up. So if it goes down in capacity, 23,000 after 1 year, you're going from 90 to 23, you're down at 67,000. I don't know what percentage of those tickets were just being bought up to maintain the streak, but you don't have to buy those tickets up anymore.
Right.
So,
it's probably not that many, but
not even close.
Yeah,
It's a larger number than we think.
Right.
It's not 200, it'll account for some of it. And then I think you're also going to see some people probably relocate to north, worse seats in north. Some of those seats way back on the northeast side, up where the opponents are not great seats, and you can't see the big screen.
Right.
But you'll see some people probably relocate there. Let's talk funding.
Yeah, and now there's one other thing we should note, that because they're giving people more elbow room, the overall capacity of the stadium is permanently going down. I mean, it will permanently go down about 10,000 seats. So we always say, they can accommodate a little over 80,000 now. That will drop by about 10,000. Some of that will be taken up by these seats that won't be bought up anymore. But there could be people impacted by that. That kind of remains to be seen. How they're going to navigate that. But that is another aspect of this that they will have to navigate. And now North Stadium. Another thing that came out of this and the study that they did was they recognized that it's a pretty tough ticket. That it's it's $60 or whatever a ticket costs these days.
Yeah.
A family of four, that's not something that they can easily afford. And one thing that they are going to look at is trying to make Memorial Stadium a more accessible place for all fans. And they're looking at North Stadium as the way to do that because North Stadium is going to continue to be bench seating. It's clearly not going to be as desirable a place to be as East or West or the new South Stadium, and so maybe that will maybe they will create a ticket at a lower price point that will make that section attractive to people. And maybe not sell those as season tickets, maybe make them more available on a game-by-game basis for people who just want to have that game day experience that, they can't afford to buy an entire season ticket and they can't afford to do so at the, premium prices that you're going to see in some of these newer sections of the stadium.
That would be cool. Let's talk funding. It's $450 million. How do they plan to make this, to pay for this?
Well, it's a little squishy. They definitely are committed to raising $225 million of it privately, and I think they will probably be able to get that done. Trev is using kind of the same model that he used when he built facilities at UNO. He kind of tapped into the big business community and some of those big donors. And worked with them not only as donors, but worked with them on development of the facilities. And he's using that same plan here. He formed together a group of business leaders that that is serving as an advisory committee for him on this. They've existed for 2 years, and they've been working on this. And a lot of those same people are also very much tapped into the big money, and the big donors that help
build
one
of them
Baxter
in your story.
Arena. Yeah. Exactly. Bruce Grucock from Kiewit is one of those
His
on
name's
the,
all
on the
over the
executive
zoo,
committee,
among other places. Yeah.
And I mean that's one thing Trev did is he was very successful at UNO in building facilities, and it's because he was able to tap into the big money donors in Omaha, and he will definitely be tapping those folks here for this. It's shown because he's using that very same model.
So he built Baxter.
He built Baxter, and half of that was privately funded. I mean,
He built the baseball and softball fields.
And that's a total of $64 million that they raised for those facilities. I mean, that was unheard of for UNO to get $64 million for.
They renovated the soccer stadium, turned it from football to soccer.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, and that was probably another 6 to 10 million. So raised tremendous money for facilities. And when you think about something as iconic as Memorial Stadium, I don't think you're going to have any trouble raising the $225 million privately for this. Then they're going to use $100 million in athletic revenues. That comes from two different pots. $50 million of it will be athletic reserves. Athletic reserves is basically the way the NU athletic budget works is all that seat license money they get every year, which last I heard it was like $25 million. That isn't even budgeted. That all goes over to the foundation and it sits there until they need it. And so it's one of the reasons why the athletic department is so well funded and never has shortfalls, because they always have money over the foundation that they can tap. So they're going to, 50 million of it is going to be those reserve funds, which are essentially seat license funds that are sitting over at the foundation. And then 50 million to do the Go Big project. They borrowed some money through a program that allows the universities to borrow from central administration, essentially at a low interest rate. And so they borrowed $50 million, and they've been paying that back just with earned revenue within athletics. Well, that loan will be fully paid off here this year, and so they're just going to take out another $50 million loan, again using the same revenue stream that paid back the previous loan, that same earned revenue stream will pay back that. So that's money they're going to have. So, $325 million they pretty much got pretty much in hand or should. The $125 million is a little squishy. They say he's to be determined, is what he said. He did, and I tried to talk to him a little about, well, couldn't you use some of the increased revenue you're going to get from all these suites and stuff, and bond that, and use that increased revenue once the new stadium opens to pay that back? And he didn't commit to that. It was interesting. He didn't say we won't seek. He would not say we will not seek public funding. They could go to the state and ask for money, and I think arguably they could. I mean, it's an important economic development thing that happens, 6 or 7 or 8 times a year.
Can't say you're not using state funds or tax dollars when you ask for tax dollars, though.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, that's and it doesn't matter that much because a lot of schools do it. But one thing Nebraska's always said is we don't use any tax dollars.
We don't
you
use
would
any
be using
tax dollars. And in this case, he's not saying we won't use any tax dollars. All what he'll say on that is we are not going to use any of the tax dollars that currently flow to the university for academics and for research and all that stuff. We ain't touching that, And
I think it's good investment for the state if that's what they want to do.
Yeah, and I think a lot of taxpayers would be supportive of doing that. But he didn't say we're going to do that, but he didn't say we aren't going to do that. And so they certainly have earned revenue opportunities. They have the ability to ask the state for money. But so we'll just have to see. They don't, this is a multi-year project, so it's not like they need that money in hand today. So I think but eventually they are going to have to come up with a plan for the full money. Should add that of that $450 million price tag, $75 million is contingency, so that in case it runs over, the actual budget is like $75 million less. So arguably they're only $50 million short if you don't count the $75 million in contingency, and if they don't need that. But there's a reason you put a contingency in, because sometimes stuff does run over, and you need to prepare for that. So.
What's the final capacity, you think, the desired capacity of the stadium when they get to it?
How big they want it to be?
Yeah, how many seats?
Well, it's going to be 80. It's going to be about 80,000. And I asked Trev, are you intentionally making the stadium smaller? Because we know that they have made the stadium smaller in recent years as the sellout streak became harder to maintain. That wasn't done under Trev. That was done under previous ADs, and they've gradually shrunk the stadium, and I wondered whether in the name of preserving the sellout streak, whether they intentionally are making it smaller. And he said absolutely not. That is not what we're doing. It's going to end up 80,000. That's just because that's what's going to fit in to this once we give everybody the kind of the space that we feel like they should have.
Notable. That ranks about 5th or 6th in the Big Ten. Number 1 is Michigan, I think. Number 2 is Penn State, I think. Ohio State, I think, is 3. Then you have the Rose Bowl, which is shrunk. But when you put Rose Bowl at full capacity, it's 101.
It looks like,
Then you got the LA Coliseum, which if you use the whole thing is around 90. And then I think you have Nebraska.
Yeah, and I think sometimes Nebraskans had visions of having 100,000 people once they joined the Big Ten, and so they could have 100,000 like Michigan and Penn State, and I don't think we're ever going to get there. That will never happen.
Having been to both of those, I would say that what I would say about Michigan is it's cool to look at, but it's really not very loud because of the way they had to build it in order to accommodate that seating. And Penn State is loud, but it's a rector set. It's all four different areas are different, and it doesn't have any sort of aesthetic beauty. It's just sort of cobbled together. Ohio State is the one that has a cohesive vision and size. It's a horseshoe, but they got that right 100 years ago when they built it, and so it would be hard to recreate that. So I think Nebraska would have the 5th or 6th biggest stadium. They might darn near have the best, though. Once they get this done, one thing that Trev said about the Go Big project, which is the football building, which hasn't been named yet, they need to put a name on it, he said, well, this is probably the last one of these you're going to see. And he was meaning that, like, from this point forward, most of your money is going to have to go to revenue sharing for athletes or NIL or whatever. And I think this could be one of the last stadium renovations you see. You know, Wisconsin got theirs done. Iowa's done. Northwestern kind of has its stadium on pause, but it's small. It's like 45,000.
Right.
A lot of these other stadiums are what they are. There's no money in the state of California to rebuild the Rose Bowl, and there's no money at USC to rebuild the Memorial Coliseum. Washington's already done its renovation. Oregon is a beautiful little 60,000 seat cauldron that's perfect for them.
I think
This might be the last one.
I think Penn State has plans, but
They probably do. They need it.
Yeah.
And they may shrink it a little. I don't know. That's a unique place. Their press box 60 years old. It's really big, but it's really like janky. Like it's rickety. It's hard to explain. It's not very nice. Penn State is big, but not that nice.
Well, it'll be really fun to watch how this moves forward and to actually see the more detailed concept designs, which I think we're probably a year away from those.
Concepts in a year, more full concepts in a year. Renderings on the World-Herald, what we have for now, it's a little rudimentary, but you do get a sense.
Yeah.
The thing that I noticed is the height. So this isn't some tiny little end zone. This is a big boy.
Right.
Know, intimidating.
Right.
You got to go into the teeth of that in the fourth quarter. That's not going to be easy to do.
Right.
I like that about it.
I mean, they're doing it about, it's very fan-centric, but yeah, it could very well, I'm sure fans are very hopeful that it'll help produce some better results on the field, too.
It probably will. This has been great, Henry. You're going to have more stories, I think, here in the coming weeks.
There's a few other
This is a
angles of
3-year
this.
story,
Yeah.
and so you're going to have a bunch on it over time.
It's an ongoing story, and I'm sure you'll be writing about it, too, Sam.
And it's not always going to be, there's going to be some moments. Fans might get displaced. People might get unhappy. But we both know Trev pretty well. You know him better than I do, but he's okay doing things that sometimes make people
He's
unhappy.
navigated difficult waters before. There's no doubt about that.
All right. Well, for Henry, I'm Sam. This is our Omaha.com podcast on Memorial Stadium. Check out www.omaha.com for full coverage of Memorial Stadium's renovation.